The White House's $1.2 trillion infrastructure package includes a pilot program for a national mile-driven tax, contradicting President Biden's previous dismissal of the policy. Tucked within the 2,702-page infrastructure bill is obscure language requiring the Department of Transportation to test the feasibility of taxing drivers for the number of miles they travel. The tax would be broad enough to target any passenger motor vehicles, including light and medium to heavy-duty trucks. The bill also requires Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen and Transportation Secretary Pete Buttigieg, or their successors, to report to Congress about the findings of the program within 3 years of its creation. Those findings, the bill's authors say, can then be used by federal lawmakers to assess whether such a tax should be implemented to fund improvements on roads and highways. According to the bill, it reads, "The objectives of the pilot program are to test the design, acceptance, implementation, and financial sustainability of a national motor vehicle per mile user fee, to address the need for additional revenue for surface transportation infrastructure and a national motor vehicle per mile user fee." Energy experts, however, say a tax on the number of miles that individuals drive is regressive and unfairly targets rural and suburban residents. Steve Malloy, a former member of the Trump administration's transition team for the Environmental Protection Agency. He said, "Drivers currently pay a gas tax that is supposed to pay for road maintenance, and all drivers pay tolls on toll roads for such maintenance. An additional by-the-mile tax will penalize suburban and rural drivers because of where they live." Mr. Malloy also added that the move was not surprising given that environmental advocates have long favored public transit over individual car ownership. He said, "The left's climate agenda seeks to force Americans to rely on mass transit in urban areas, which is evident by their efforts to make it more burdensome to own a car." Mr. Buttigieg initially floated the idea of a mileage tax on drivers earlier this year during a trip to Pennsylvania. Mr. Buttigieg said at the time, "I think that shows a lot of promise. If we believe in that so-called user pays principle, the idea that part of how we pay for roads is you pay based on how much you drive, a so-called vehicle mile traveled tax or a mileage tax, whatever you want to call it, could be the way to do it." The comments stirred controversy, especially among Republicans and suburbanites, forcing the White House to repudiate the idea. The idea of a mileage tax, though, seems to now be on the table in the $1.2 trillion infrastructure deal Joe Biden negotiated with a bipartisan group of 10 senators. White House Press Secretary Jennifer Psaki is on record, however, as saying that Mr. Biden supports the deal. James Taylor, the president of conservative-leaning Heartland Institute, said a national mileage tax would also break Joe Biden's promise of not raising taxes above anyone making less than $400,000. He added that such a tax would disproportionately affect the very working-class rural and suburban residents that Joe Biden has attempted to woo back into the Democratic Party. James Taylor said, "The Biden administration's agenda to tax Americans by the mile is a terrible idea that will disproportionately impact rural Americans while giving rich urban dwellers a free ride. The miles-driven tax is nothing short of a stealth mechanism for a major tax increase relative to current taxation and will most severely affect low-income households."